right. We are back with another episode of Wise Woman Wellness, Hormones and Beyond. I am your host, Dr. Jenny Quartano, and I'm here with Adrienne Roth, our other practitioner in our practice. And we're going to talk today about perimenopause because I think this is such a big black hole that we need to dive into. It deserves a little more attention and a little more explanation. So before we jump in, I just want to give you a little bit of background, a little bit of introduction about ourselves. And so I will go and then I'll let Adrienne introduce herself as well. So I've been practicing functional medicine for about 6 years now. My background is as a physical therapist, and I think that was a great transition for me because we learn everything to do with exercise, the biochemical processes of what's happening in our body, and how those things interplay with movement and cognition and everything else. And so when I really found this holistic umbrella approach to care, functional medicine was just a great approach for me. So now that I'm in this perimenopause age group myself, I feel like this was a natural discussion that I felt like we needed to have. And Adrienne, thank you for joining me. Go ahead and introduce yourself, please.
Oh my gosh, I'm so excited for this conversation because I feel like I have so much to learn from Dr. Jenny in this category. I'm Adrienne Roth. I am by trade an occupational therapist, so a little bit similar to Jenny. Through my training in medicine and then learning how to really optimize health through functional change, I really fell in love with functional medicine and using my background as an occupational therapist as a functional medicine specialist through my own hormone journey and health journey. And so I'm here today to have this conversation with you guys and learn more with you.
Awesome. So I want to start with a little bit of context here because I think perimenopause is this name that's thrown around. So medically, when we talk about perimenopause, we're talking about this phase of life prior to menopause where your period stops completely for 12 months. That is what delineates somebody being in full menopause. But this period leading up to that, where you have hormonal changes, and that can be as long as 10 years before, oftentimes is what's reported in the literature. So starting in early 40s, usually with menopause being in early 50s, those are very average. But we see a lot of women in our practice who are coming in their 30s and their 40s, sometimes in their 50s with these symptoms. And so I had a conversation with a client a couple weeks ago, and she was telling me about her symptoms. And I said, well, that sounds very premenopausal. And it was very emotional for her because she said, well, I'm not sure I'm done having children. And so we kind of had to back up because I think I just lumped this all in as like these hormone changes that happen in this midlife phase, but they aren't necessarily parallel to fertility. Oftentimes they're parallel to these underlying things that are going on in our body. And so I thought this is an important conversation for us to have.
Well, and that's a really interesting conversation too, because when we're looking at our society right now and women and working, people are waiting to have kids. And so when we're seeing this
Yeah.
perimenopause move up, when it's not quite, like you said, maybe not
Right.
perimenopause or these foundational things, it's really interesting and it's becoming a much bigger conversation. So, what things would you start with addressing if you're
Yeah.
seeing these perimenopause like symptoms arise?
Yeah. So I think a lot of women are coming in complaining of things like hot flashes at night, right? Poor sleep, maybe weight gain, low energy, make brain fog, right? Mental clarity issues. And so all of those things, yes, are hormonal at their core. There's a hormonal component to them. But when you kind of take a step back and you look at, but why, right? I think we can dive into what's going on in your gut. Probably the biggest one for women I see is what's going on in your nervous system. And if you're completely dysregulated, which most of us are, because you're managing a household and running a job and running chauffeuring your kids to 7 different events and not exercising because you didn't sleep well last night. And so it just becomes a cycle that I feel like we have to kind of break into. And so starting from those foundations of let's look at your symptoms. So yes, those are the hormonal symptoms, but what else is going on in your body? How is that functioning? What are your basic labs telling us? And then what is your lifestyle telling us that might be contributing to this? And I think those are kind of the core pieces we have to start to put together to say, okay, maybe this is hormone change related, but what are the things we can optimize underneath you to improve that naturally?
And I think you hit the nail on the head there too, with like all the different hats women are wearing, right? Like
Yeah.
they might not have time for the meal. And so it's so interesting. What do you recommend women do to get started on this journey, like to prioritize their health, or where's the turning point where they do you think that they're like, oh, we need to get help?
Yeah. So, I mean, honestly, I think for most of us, right, it's a path where maybe we weren't unhealthy before, but we weren't optimizing our health, right? And so it's things like skipping breakfast, because intermittent fasting was a trend, right? Which I am not a huge fan of, particularly for women who don't have a good regulated nervous system. You're more likely to spike your cortisol, especially if you're adding black coffee to that. So it's little things like looking at the things you've done in your life that maybe were not poor decisions, but they weren't optimizing and supporting your hormones, that we need to start unwinding before we can move forward with, making a healthy cycle and getting you back on track and eliminating those sleep disturbances and things like that. So I guess, where to start from, I think, is that foundation of we look at things like what's your diet like, not just what are you eating, but when are you eating? Are you eating enough? Are you eating too much? Are you eating the wrong things? Are they balanced, right? Then we look and dive into exercise. And as a PT, this one is so fun to me and so near and dear to my heart. But over exercising is a huge problem that I see in women, particularly who are dysregulated. And so when they're coming in with these hormone symptoms, convincing them that exercising less will actually do more for their bodies. I actually ran into a previous client a few weeks ago, and we worked so hard on this. And it was really hard for her because she loved hard workouts. And I'm with her. I loved CrossFit, but there was a season where I didn't do that because my hormones just couldn't support it. And this woman said to me, I didn't forget what you said, and you were 100% right. The less I've been working out, the more weight I've been dropping. So appreciating that there are all those things interplay, right? So exercise, sleep. Are you doing the right things to try and set yourself up for good sleep? Stress, right? That's a huge one. And what's going on with your nervous system? And do you even know, because it's just been slowly piling on? We just take on one more thing, and where are we at now? And then what are those, relationships and resources and other things that you need or you have in your life, and how are those? Are It's really the big picture of what I want to go over with most women. And we can't tackle it all at once, right? But let's pick the biggest impactors and see what we can do.
It's really interesting because I hear you say like stress and cortisol, right? Is like one of the biggest factors. And right, when you say that to a client or you say that to someone, you oftentimes they're like, well, yeah, my kid was sick this month. Like there's nothing I can do about it. But what I'm also hearing you say is there's like the physiological stress, right? From food and sleep and over exercising. And that's more of like a bucket of stress I feel like your clients can maybe control. Is that where you would start with them versus,
I think
when
that's
they
that.
think stress, just the life
Yeah. Yeah.
circumstances?
Yeah. You're so right, right? There are things that we can't change. And not everybody can stop working and stop driving their kid to everything and homeschool, or, whatever, not homeschool, whatever those things are that we just can't remove those stressors. But there are so many things, like you just said, that are in our control that contribute to what's happening in our body. And even things like what we call leaky gut, right? Where our gut is not healthy and it has holes that are allowing the food to get out in our body. That in and of itself increases our stress response and affects our cortisol, which in turn affects our hormones in our body. And so I think those are things that, people don't know. They don't connect A to B to C because that's never been explained to them. And it isn't something traditional medicine works with. And I think from a women's perspective, at least for me, right, there's a time and a place for hormones, and, adding in bioidentical hormones to support your hormone health. But oftentimes there are so many things we can do to optimize those hormones beforehand that people are missing out on.
What do you find like so when you get these clients and you're seeing the pre-perimenopausal symptoms, have they tried to go to physicians first? What kind of response are they getting there, that's kind of led them to you?
Yeah. So I think sometimes, probably the biggest response I see, which is so disheartening to me, is, my doctor told me I'm fine, or to just deal with it, or that's just part of aging, right? And I feel like women's health in general is so swept under the rug. And so, it doesn't have to be fine, and you don't just have to deal with it. And if you have those symptoms, they're coming from somewhere. Your body's not optimized. All of those things can be true, even though your labs might look okay, at least to the naked eye, or you're in that phase of life where that's normal and accepted. So I think that's probably the number one biggest thing, is women who are frustrated, who want to challenge that I really have to feel this crappy for the next 20 years. So I think that's one piece of it. And then I think another area where I see a lot of women is, well, I was told that I can go on hormones when I'm ready, and I'm not ready to do that, right? I have a history of breast cancer. I have another very personal reason, and I'm with you on that, right? I have a family history of osteoporosis, so I'm very much in tune with that. which is why I'm so passionate about keeping my body functioning optimally and producing optimal amounts of hormones for as long as possible to prevent a long period of no, estrogen or needing to take estrogen supplements if my body can do it naturally. And there are ways, right? Our bodies take over other areas produce hormones postmenopausally. So it's not just like you have none, you just have different levels. And so I think even that is something people aren't aware of. They don't know how their bodies function.
I think that's one of the really cool things that clients get by working with you, right? It's just that individualized approach, right? Like in general healthcare, sometimes we get that cookie cutter, like this is the path, you can choose A or B, but really, right, you're looking at individual people's baselines and what their optimal is. And so it's really cool when they get to work with you and we get to see the results of their individualized plan and when we really meet their body and them where they're at, right? Instead of just trying to blanket or stick band-aids on things that might not fit right.
Yeah. I think the other piece that's so important and critical to working with us is it's not just what to do, right? Because I've had plenty of clients come in and say, okay, I know I need to eat well, I know I need to exercise, but what does that mean? And like you said, what does that mean for you? Because what diet works for Susie isn't going to work for Sue, right? So everybody is an individual and everybody's needs are so different based on what's happening in their body. And how do we provide them, not just with the tools and the recommendations, but then also the how to make that happen. And I think that's the fun part about seeing people.
Well, and it's just so cool, right? Because we all have our different preferences too. Some people are breakfast people, some people are not breakfast people, and you really get to get creative as a person and as a practitioner to find these little solutions that work. Protein coffee or, you know, fun snacks. And so it's really cool to get to connect with clients and come up with those plans. Um, that might even be a good plan for you or other clients in the future as well too.
Yeah, absolutely. There's nothing more rewarding than seeing somebody go from exhausted, run down, zero desire for intimacy, affecting their relationships at home, to thriving, sleeping well, not snapping at their kids anymore, actually having a sexual desire for their partner, which is part of life and is a fun thing, right? We should want to support that. And so I think, I probably have 10 husbands lined up ready to pay me more if that was something we could fix in a heartbeat. But the good news is there's good ways to get around and
Yeah.
support all of that and give you that optimal health back, whatever that looks like for you and your goals.
Right. And really, when your health is impacted, it affects every facet of your life. It's not just your physical endurance or how you feel, it's your relationships and your work and your kids. And I think as we look at raising families and our friends and our relationships, we all have such an impact on each other. And so taking care of yourself is just so crucial.
It really is. So I know this is not your phase of life, but do you have any suggestions, kind of looking ahead now and having this conversation about things that you do currently that you feel like are setting you up for success in that? Because I think I go back and I think about what I would have done differently had I been having this, conversation 15 years ago.
Yeah, it's so interesting because I feel like when you look at building habits in your life, right? I believe the research says it takes 21 days and to completing a habit or implementing a habit to make a change. And I think that a lot of these health changes, you can't make all the changes at once. You can change one or two things. And so I think where I'm at in life is always, and where I've been is adding one thing at a time and adding one bite-sized thing to improve my health, whether it's lemon water and a protein breakfast, and really getting my habits strong so that when I get to a phase of life that is more crazy or I have older kids or grandkids, that I can ultimately have these foundations that are just part of my rhythms um, to set me up for success and really know that I've invested in my health. If you ask my husband, investing in my health is one of my favorite things.
Same.
But
And
there
those
are
are
worse things to
expensive,
invest in.
but there are worse
Yeah,
ones, right?
there is. But I like to tell him that, hey, we're investing in this now. If not, you'll see this in my medical bills later.
Right.
Um,
For
and so I
sure.
think that's really it, right? Like when you build these foundations, these habits slowly, health isn't something that's going to be fixed overnight and in one day. And it's not something that will stay the same and work forever. But when you kind of learn your body and stuff and build these habits, you're really set up for success in the future. And I think listening to you and working with you as a practitioner, and just as a peer, like that's something I strive for. You do such a good job of implementing that in your life, with your little boy, and just trying to find those rhythms that will help set me up for success in the future. Because I know that when I have kids and I become overwhelmed, if I don't have that stuff in place, there's no way in heck that'll be sticking.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and thank you for that compliment because sometimes, I mean, we all do that, right? We're like, oh man, I don't have it together. Or, I didn't get that done today. So I appreciate that. But I think you're right. It's so much about what can we do, what little thing, right? So if I need to start exercising, I don't move. I'll actually say this is a great example for me because I feel like this year has been really busy and I did a lot of sitting and a lot of planning and a lot of computer work. And it was wearing on just my activity levels overall. And so I was like, okay, I'm not going to get back to 8,000 steps tomorrow, but I'm going to start doing 6,000. And then once I had 2 full weeks of 6,000, it was 6,500. And now I'm back to 8,000 and aiming for 10, right? Which is again, just a personal goal for me, right? That doesn't have to be for everybody. There are some longevity things that fit with that made that my target. But I think all of those things, like even when we fall off, we can't just jump back on and do everything all at once. And
Yeah.
so picking one thing that seems feasible is a great place to start.
Well, and I think that's a great point too, because I think if you build up your toolbox over the years and you have these strategies and habits that you know are good for you and that help your body, you can kind of modify them to that season of life, right? Because
Right.
there's a 5 day a week season of life and there's a 3 day a week season of life. Or, hey, you're really stressed. Let's incorporate some more
Yeah.
stretching and yoga. And so it's really learning to like kind of take those tools and adjust them to meet where you're at for that season. And I feel like as you learn these habits and tuck them away, it sets you up for success down the line.
For sure. I think the other thing that I recommend for most people, whether you're starting here or you're starting here, is you have to track, right? So if you're not
Yeah.
measuring, you're not managing. And so whether that's cycle tracking or if you're past that phase of life or you're just, I still think that's important. But we talked about
Yeah.
that in another episode you can come back and listen to. Measuring your sleep, measuring your steps per day, maybe measuring calories for a period of time just to kind of get an idea where you are. Maybe not, maybe that's macros, but like whatever you're trying to improve on, you've got to have some measure. Otherwise, it's like, "Oh, I think I'm doing okay." And it
Right.
really just is not helpful to you. Now, that doesn't mean you have to get so wrapped up in that, oh my gosh, I didn't hit it today. Although I have definitely done laps around my house because I wasn't going to miss my step goal for that day
Yeah.
at 9 o'clock at night, right? So I think those things can be encouraging as long as you use them in the right way. But if you're not measuring it, you have
I think that's totally a good point in the sense of like we need to have goals, right? Like you
to.
can't just wake up and be like, this week I'm going to go to the gym and I'm going to be better when you don't know what that looks like, right? Because you don't have a plan.
Yeah.
Um, but again, setting, and I know as a therapist, you do this as well, setting attainable goals, right? You don't want to say, like you said, walk 15,000 steps when you know you're doing desk work all day, because
Yeah.
that mentally, if you're not going to hit it and you're not going to set yourself up for success, then we kind of fall off the train there. So just making sure, like you said, adjusting our goals to what's feasible for our life, or thinking about that when you set your goals, right?
Yeah. And I think that comes back full circle to what you said, which is habits, right? So really when we look at the literature, changing habits is more effective than setting goals because once you set a goal and you
Yeah.
meet it or you don't meet it, that's it.
Yes.
Right? Versus if you're changing your habits and using that data to track whether your habits are successful or not, is probably the better longevity tool for most of our clients as well. But I know that, as you're coming in and you're overwhelmed and you're thinking about how am I going to fit that in? I'm already, not cognitively clear. I'm not sleeping. I don't feel good. I'm snappy at my kids. You want me to do one more thing. And I think that's the value of finding a clinician to start working with. Because
Yeah.
you can't change it all at once and it can be overwhelming with where to even start. And so that's where Adrienne and I are here because we can look at that whole big picture and figure out what's going to give you the biggest bang for your buck to start making some meaningful changes in those symptoms and appreciate that this is not perimenopause, or maybe it is, but that's okay. We also don't have to be miserable. That's just not a license to feel like garbage for the next 20 years and watch your life decline. I don't subscribe to that, and I don't want my clients to either.
Well, and like you said, like chances are if you aren't feeling good, there's something you can work on, right? Like this is not the reality of the rest of your life. And I think that's
Yeah.
just so important for us to hear sometimes that
And I
you do
can
have
say
the ability to change.
right, 100% confident, right? But I've never worked with a woman who came in with any of those hormone symptoms that we weren't able to make a meaningful change in the direction of good, whether we put that in the bucket of perimenopause or menopause or just anxiety or, other hormone related issues. There are so many labels that we give somebody from a medical system that can seem very doom and gloom when the reality is if we get to those root causes, most of the time we can mitigate, if not completely eliminate.
Which is one of the coolest things about our health. So
Really is. So with that, if this sounds appealing to you, we're going to drop our website in the comments below. On that website, you'll find information about how to work with us. You'll also find a tool to track your symptoms. So if you're wondering, well, what do I really have going on? Maybe you felt so terrible for so long, you don't even really realize what's going on anymore. It's a great tool to connect with us. It's a great tool to fill out, start getting that information. And then you can go there also and book a free consultation call with us to see if we're a good team and a good fit for you. And if we're not, we'll help you find somebody who is.
um,
Any last closing remarks, Adrienne?
no, I really enjoyed this conversation. It was definitely
Yeah,
fun to get to dive into what more, just what all we can do for women's health. So
sure. Well,
always a
good. Well, then, until next time, guys have a great day and be healthy.